Hey there, my name is Mike, and this is The Untrained Artist, where we see just how far we can get using whatever tools we have and a few YouTube videos. So this is just going to be primarily a value study for what you're seeing here on the screen. This is a local lake. It's right near my house here, so I have access to it quite a bit. Figured it was a pretty good thing to use. I've got a lot of different pictures of it, different lighting conditions. It just seemed like a good subject matter. So, since this is just a value study, I'm going to be doing everything primarily black and white. At the end I throw on a little bit of blue and green just to see how it would look, but since it's primarily just a value study, we can do it with pretty much any dark color. So since I have a lot of black, I'm going with that. So at this point, I actually had, this is a little silly to me, but I actually went through on the iPad and digitally kind of made a sketch or mock-up. You know, you can look at a picture all you want, but you're not necessarily going to remember everything. Anytime you really want to practice something, in my limited experience, it really helps to actually go through, paint the entire thing, and really force yourself to get as many of the details in so that you memorize it. Because for some reason, just putting that brush on the paper, or, you know, in this case on an iPad, really seems to make all the difference. So at this point, most of what you're seeing here, these trees that I'm making, most of these are going to get covered up. Just because I had to do so many layers of the black, partially because I have a little bit of a problem getting dark colors. I tend to kind of lighten everything up a little bit too much, and part of it is also because this is very cheap paint, so there's just not nearly as much pigment as you would expect there to be. So just kind of blocking some things in here. This is, if you go back to the original, and I might just kind of put it into the corner here every once in a while, just so you can kind of refresh your idea of what it looks like, I guess. But yeah, just blocking in some shapes here. Mostly going to be focusing on the horizon here. Not so much on composition. In fact, the compositions on this one specifically is pretty bad. The original composition, if you look at the photograph, is much better. I kind of lost track of what I was doing and it got a little bit compressed, so not really focusing too much on that. Again, this is just about values. Light values, you know, the highlights, the shadows, and how much contrast and, you know, where it should be put, that kind of thing. So now you can see on the right hand side there, it almost looks like I'm new enough that I can't remember what the problem is called, but if you look, there's the paint kind of leaked up, almost looks like some weird trees on the right side there. That's a total accident. I was kind of laughing to myself when it happened because I was really annoyed. And then I realized it actually kind of looked like trees. Unfortunately, they are not at all to scale with what I was trying to do, so I couldn't really use that. So I just kind of had to try to paint over it later on. There's actually going to be another one coming up here too, where I accidentally used a blow dryer, and it pushes the paint up into the water I have. So right here, I know for sure that it's going to be one of the darkest parts of the, where, I mean, I guess you could call it the sky, but really it's in the water. It's just the reflections of the clouds above. But the clouds were actually fairly dark, so I knew for a fact that that was going to be one of the darker parts of the water area. So I just, since this is a value study and I really wanted to start off with any of the darker values and then kind of work my way back towards light, I decided to, in as many times as possible, to start off with whatever the darker parts are and kind of work towards lighter. For example, the clouds that you're seeing me paint here, what I basically decided to do was just kind of block it in a little bit, and then I go back later with a damp brush and kind of smooth it out. One of the things that I like to do, and if you can see off to the right-hand side here, I'm using a porcelain kind of a mixing tray here. What I've done is, when I'm doing this kind of thing, I like to do get it as dark as possible, and then with whatever's left over on that brush, put it down below, add a little bit of water to that, and that gives me two different versions, the darkest possible and kind of a, let's call it like a 30% gray. And you'll notice a lot of the what you might call loosely the finer kind of mid-tones, like mid to light tones, I'm actually just grabbing a lot of the time from either the side of one of them or that lower kind of the tray. So the part you just saw me paint there, I really did not like how that turned out. I'm gonna just say that whatever I did there was not the appropriate way to do that. What I was actually trying to do, if you look back at the original photograph, is there's spots of reflection in the water, and then there's wind sweeping over the surface of the water in some parts, and it's being disturbed. So I was basically trying to block in the darker area where the wind is actually disturbing the water. It kind of gave off a little bit of a darker, non-reflective surface. But I really don't think I nailed it. Now with the clouds here, a lot of what you're seeing is a lack of experience on my part. I mean, on one hand, you could kind of squint and say, oh yeah, it totally turned out, but really, if it did turn out, it was just an accident. Here, mostly just doing a lot of blending. I find that I like to blend whenever I can't think of what to do next. That seems to be my answer to everything. Okay, so what I'm trying right now, I really did not work very well. I mean, if you look at the finished version and kind of squint from about 10 feet, I guess it kind of works, but it in my opinion, it failed. I was basically trying to find some way of representing rings expanding outwards from the birds that are going to be appearing a little bit later. But like I said, I really don't think it worked very well. I need to keep working on that for sure. Yeah, like for example, these lines here, they're basically all straight and they're supposed to be curved. It's just, the entire thing just really didn't work. I might have to do a study just on figuring out ways to do water ripples like that. You'll also notice that I'm very hesitant. I tend to not put a lot of paint or water on the brush. I'm always very worried that I'm going to put too much water and mess something up, so I tend to want to run the brush too dry. You can actually see a lot of the near, just a few inches from the bottom in the center there, you can see a lot of kind of dry texture. Okay, so at this point, this is where I start. There's a little bit of an island on this lake. This is where I start trying to put in the island. Now, I wasn't paying attention to composition. Normally, I would be extremely picky about that, but I got a little ahead of myself and forgot to notice that I was putting it right in the middle where it really shouldn't be. But as you can see here, what I'm trying to do is basically just it's mostly kind of a flat bottom on this island just because of the perspective, and then I'm basically trying to layer in some trees. Now these are going to obviously lighten up as they go, and I'm just kind of holding the brush upside down, as you can see, and just kind of getting those natural spikes. I'm also trying to, I know that I want to get the tops of some of these trees to be a lot darker than the bottom, and I was hoping to try to simulate a little bit of a foggy appearance right at the water line. So the tops of the trees on this island would have been darker than the rest, just to try to make it look like it was foggy. So what I was trying to do was figure out how to put, now so you can see here, this is where I start to go wrong. So number one, I put way too much water. You'll see in a second it starts dripping down pretty bad. Which, because there was so much water up at the top, it made it very difficult to get any paint up there, because the moment I would try to charge in some paint, it just fell right back down. You can see here, it takes me quite a while to pull up in all of this extra water. I'm actually really lucky that it didn't drip down and ruin it. That would have been the end of it right there. So at this point, I'm just kind of blocking in a little bit of what I'm going to consider the background shading for. There's a stand of. I don't actually know exactly what kind of trees they are. They might be birch trees. There's a lot of birch trees around here. There's some kind of deciduous tree. Yeah, just basically trying to block in and prep for the trunks going in. So this would be kind of the far distant undercoating, you might say. So here I am trying to put some of the paint back up towards the top, knowing it's going to run down, but I figure if any of it stays in the middle, I can make it work. So at this point, I'm basically trying to let the paint darken up the bottoms of the trees that are going to be the reflections, while trying to put more paint back up at the top. Now you can see here, if you look at what just happened with the large ink like backflow up top there, that was my fault. I had way more water than I thought I did. I couldn't see it from the angle I was sitting at, and as soon as I hit the hair dryer, it pushed all of the water and the paint up, and it pushed it up just far enough that it hit all the water up there and just spread like crazy. So it was really way too early for me to start doing this, but it felt like something to do at the time. I'm basically just trying to kind of add in a little bit of, well, here now I'm just kind of like blocking in some color, but originally I was trying to kind of make the wave textures, the kind of water ripples. So if you can't tell, I'm actually kind of not really scumbling the brush along, I don't think. I'm not really scraping, I'm just more like dabbing. But I'm also spinning the brush in my hand. Sometimes the spinning motion, when I spin the brush around in my fingers, it kind of rebalances the brush and gives me just a little bit more of a random brush stroke. Most of my experiences with Photoshop, so it was basically me trying to figure out some way of like scattering and randomizing. So now I'm basically just trying to push these up a little bit further to try to hide some of the mistake where I got that backflow earlier. Now we put in the ducks. I feel like I should have grabbed a different brush and actually like tried, but again, this was just supposed to be a value kind of a sketch. Slightly embarrassing. This was actually not supposed to be the painting. This was just the sketchy, like the value study for the painting I was going to do later. It turned out interesting enough that I decided to just use the video and put it up. But so this is not actually the painting, or I would have actually put a lot more effort into the things like the ducks and the birds and certain aspects of the water and that kind of thing. So this is going to be very loose. Now, I think it's kind of hard to tell at this point, but what I'm actually doing right now are clouds. To me, they kind of almost look like a mountain. It's actually supposed to be clouds. I mean, I guess it could be a mountain, but it's clouds. So at this point, I'm basically just using some of the darker color that I happen to have on my brush and try to just kind of put in a little bit of the darker, the kind of like the darker underparts of the clouds. And then, as you can see here, I put a little bit more water on my brush, and I'm just kind of diffusing it a little bit, blending it. Basically taking all the dark and just kind of hoping to push it up just a little bit to kind of blend it up. And again, just patching some of this in here. I actually thought for a moment about just not putting any land on the right there, because it really didn't necessarily add anything. It was just a kind of an ugly block of rocks in the picture with a path on it, but I kind of felt like it needed something just for composition and balance. Yeah, I think it was just going to look too open if it was all water. I just wanted some kind of a sweeping angle, so I just decided to put it in. Okay, so now we actually start the roughing in the tree trunks that are going to be sitting on this island here. See, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm having to do so many layers because I'm using really watered down paint, and the paint really isn't that dark to begin with. So part of the reason that I wanted to do this value study was just because I need to really push myself and get used to using a lot more like rich, darker colors. Either that or just change my style to be completely subtle and lean into it and pretend like that was just the way I chose to paint. I think this will give me a better range later on, so that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so now I'm going to try to put in not necessarily the little ripple lines. That's not necessarily what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to give indications that they're there. Basically, the brushes I have access to right now are never going to be able to be detailed enough to accurately portray the little the ripple lines off in the distance there. It's just too far away. So basically what I'm trying to do is just kind of use the brush to tell the person that that's supposed to be there, and just kind of leave it up to them to imagine that that's really what it is. It's more of a placeholder than an attempt at reality. I'm basically doing the same thing here too. Normally for moments like this I would switch to the other camera, but I was actually using the other camera to And that's the iPad is what I usually record that other angle with, and I was using it to show my original picture so I could, study it. Which is why I only have one angle for this one. So at this point you can see I'm kind of getting a little bit more aggressive with the tones. I'm just really starting to block things in, getting a little bit more confident. Trying to break up some lines. I would have, if I had remembered, I was going to go back and actually add some grass to this kind of sweeping slope here. But I just kind of got wrapped up in the color and never did. And again, just trying to put in some of the ripple lines. Really too dark for that. I'm not sure why I didn't water that down just a little bit, but I guess once it dries it works. So at this point I realized they don't actually look like ducks, so I tried to go back and add a little bit more, but I gave up almost immediately. I took one look at it and was like, there's no way to fix that. Those are never going to look like ducks. So at this part, I'm not sure exactly what I was thinking. I mean, I'm not sure if I was getting impatient and that's why I was moving so fast, or if I was trying for an effect. I don't think it worked. I mean, with a little practice, I could see how it could work. I just don't think it worked there. So at this point I started mixing the wrong color. My light blue, there's the cerulean. It's actually it's very chalky and fairly opaque, so I don't like to use it. I prefer the translucent color, so instead I'm using ultramarine. And again, you can kind of see just how much paint it takes, because there's really not a lot of pigment in this paint. Eventually I'll upgrade to better paint. Oh, I should also mention, just very quickly, this is actually Strathmore 300 paper. This is not good paper. It's not 100% cotton rag or anything like that. It's just because this was just a quick value study, I didn't want to waste my bitter paper, so I just did it on this. I still think I might actually do the real version of this, in which case I will use the actual cotton rag paper. I do kind of like the mood of the painting. The fact that I put so many light layers, I think actually did a decent job of affecting the mood overall, and I think that worked on accident. Like I like the mood of it. I just wish I would have put more time into it, especially on the water. And here I'm just kind of pre-wetting the paper down just because I want to put some blue in the water and I don't want it to be too dry. I want it to blend nicely. Mostly just because there's already so much rough texture there. I figured if I roughed in some dry blue, it would just add to the confusion. and I kind of wanted to blend it a little bit, make it a little bit more subtle. And if you notice, I'm doing my best at this point when I'm putting in the blue. I'm in the water. I'm doing my best to keep my brush strokes in that kind of circular pattern to really, you know, show the ripples in the water that are coming out from around these ducks. At this point in the sky, you can see I'm actually getting pretty quick here. You can always tell if I'm kind of like in the zone because I start like sloshing paint around and not really caring where I put it. That's when I'm having fun. I enjoy watching people paint like this. It always takes me a while to kind of work up to it. Normally I would have liked to charge in blue to these trees up here, and if you're new, charging is basically where you already have water on the paper, like say one color, like black or gray or green or something, and then you just while it's still wet, you drip a little of another color in there and just kind of let it blend wherever it lies, and it's kind of a nice effect. And I wish I would have done that far earlier instead of just glaze over it while the darker trees were already dry. I think that would have looked nicer. I think it would have had a better effect. So at this point I'm adding lemon yellow to the whatever's left of the ultramarine, and just to kind of create a green, and I'm just going to kind of patch in on some of the trees. Not really trying to make them green, I just wanted a little bit of a contrasting not a contrasting color, but just another color, just to kind of give the blue something to share the space with. I don't know, I'm not sure how else to say that. And probably right about there was where I should have added in the grass with a fan brush or something, but just didn't think of it. Instead, I started trying to work on the reflections. So at this point, there's very little on the brush, and I'm just trying to pull down a little bit of the paint. Again, this is where that second camera angle would have been nice, but oh well. So you can kind of tell that where the tree lines are, all through the dark tree line areas, they're really getting just overworked. I mean, you can tell there's just too many layers. What I really should have done, I guess that's kind of the whole point, but what I really should have done is just put a lot more paint into it, and just done probably about 2 fewer layers than I actually did. I think I put about 5, give or take. So now I'm just kind of putting in some local wildlife. I always like to put birds. I don't know, it kind of livens up the scene. And a note about birds, I've noticed a lot of people, when they put in any kind of birds into their paintings, they always make them like flying in a V or something, and it's always a perfect V. Birds don't really fly in V's, only like, geese basically. And I don't know if I have geese flying around this lake all the time. It drives me nuts with all the honking and everything. They love waking me up. One thing you notice when you spend a lot of time looking at geese is they almost never fly in a perfect V. So if you're going to put birds into the scene, randomize it a little bit. Also, if you're going to put any other kind of birds, a lot of the times they don't fly together, which is why these up here, I actually intended these to be more like seagulls. And seagulls are actually, I think they're kind of scavengers, and they're fairly competitive. So if you're going to put any kind of gulls in the picture, I would say don't have too many in one spot. Also, you'll notice that the wings on the birds, some are low, some are high in a V, like they're, about to flap their wings downwards. Just kind of add a little variety. So now I'm pulling off the tape, and we're going to see how it actually looks. This is always my favorite part. Something about the clean white edges and the straight lines. To me, this is when whatever crap you were working on becomes an actual painting. Yep, there it is. Well, that's pretty much it for now. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them below. If you found any of this useful or entertaining, go ahead and hit the like button. And if you want to see more, go ahead and subscribe. Thanks.